I'm Lakshmi Krishnan, Vice President, Life Sciences at the National Research Council.
Could you please briefly and, if possible, in layman's terms, explain to us what bioengineering and biomanufacturing are, and perhaps most importantly, why are they relevant to Canada's future economy?
Very simply put, bioengineering is applying engineering principles to biological systems. So what does that actually mean? It means that we are using living systems and then applying engineering principles from different fields, whether they be from genomics, from artificial intelligence, from micro systems or systems biology, and apply that to living systems so that we are able to increase their value, increase their application, and develop some very impactful applications.
Why is that important to our future economy and perhaps specifically to life sciences, since this is your area of expertise? What sort of impact will it have on, for instance, identifying, treating, or curing illnesses, since that's particularly topical right now?
Bioengineering actually offers promises for many different sectors. So, for example, we can apply these same principles to improving certain environmental remediation projects, for example, or we could apply similar systems for diagnosing disease or for treating disease or to increase food security. So there's really multitude applications with bioengineering. But for me, what's most exciting from my field is essentially the potential applications in health technologies.
In this age of COVID-19 reality, and of course also the potential for future pandemics, what role do you see for genomics and bioengineering? What role do you see it playing, basically, in the future of both vaccinology and immunology, which I understand are both your specialties?
So I don't want to sound alarmist at all, but I think the general expert opinion right now is that pandemics like the one we are facing right now could become more frequent. Just because of the coalescing of global travel, many lifestyle changes. So this may actually be a common occurrence, unfortunately. However, the good news, though, is I think what the current pandemic has demonstrated to us is that by rallying together various groups, whether it is large pharma companies or early stage discoveries, genomics, and all other multidisciplinary approaches, we can actually find solutions together, right? So, for example, who would have imagined that within a year we would actually have a couple of vaccines that are approved and it would actually be put into the arms of people? And these vaccines, the two, the Pfizer and the Moderna, are based on synthetic biology principles. These are the newer, innovative medicines based on mRNA. So this could not have happened if there was not the research that went into engineering biology. Similarly, I think as we move forward, the ability for us to use these engineering principles to miniaturize the way we access samples and analyze and understand disease is going to be critical. So if you look at genomics, for example, we know even right now with the COVID strain changing in its genomics, we were able to identify it because we have very precise genomic tools. And so as it is happening, we already have a heads up as to what's happening to the virus and how it's changing. And we can adapt those principles back into the diagnostics of the vaccines we are developing, right? So that's a very good example of how critical genomic principles become when you're actually going to do surveillance and you're going to keep watch on what's happening. If you take it one step further, if you go to diagnostics, again, you need two things that can be very useful. One, you need the ability to identify a change very in an accelerated fashion. But again, the second point is you need to have technologies and tools which can make the diagnostic simple and rapid so that you don't need to necessarily walk into a diagnostic clinic. But in the future, you can imagine a situation where you could have a device that you could just, test yourself very quickly and rapidly. And those types of principles of miniaturizing and applying that to specific and very precise measurements is also going to be something that's going to be possible with the convergence of engineering biology principles, right? Take it one step further, take it to medicines, whether it's vaccines or therapies. Again, applying this type of principles, we can not only discover new medicines rapidly, but we're going to be able to biomanufacture it rapidly. And then we are going to be able to compress the timeline necessary to actually have the scale at which we need these products produced. And one of the innovations that is happening in the biomanufacturing field is technologies as like what we call as digital twinning. Like you can use artificial intelligence to monitor your manufacturing process and to tweak it and tailor it and accelerate it so that you can actually improve the yield of your end product. And this, again, would become extremely important in the future with emerging infections or pandemics or even other kinds of diseases, whether it is chronic diseases, whether it's rare diseases. You're going to need these type of principles to be able to be extremely precise, extremely effective, and also very safe, because that's, I think, going to be the critical piece of what we're going to want to see in new medicines.
Correct me if I'm wrong, but anything to do with biotech, bioengineering, those are tremendously powerful or potentially transformative fields for the overall economy with a multitude of applications, and of course, all across the globe. Are there areas where Canada is particularly strong, and how competitive are we in general, given competition is coming from every corner of the globe these days?
That's a very good question, and it's actually a very complex question because there are so many different factors that are that come to play when you look at what makes an industry thrive in a certain country. In my opinion, where I think we have strength is the early stage innovation. We actually are very good in developing a pipeline of Canadian innovation, but often the challenge happens is that these Canadian small to medium-sized enterprises will tend to, leave our borders and go elsewhere because they need the subsequent funding in order to scale. So I think that's the gap that we need to try and bridge. And in terms of areas where we have a very healthy pipeline is really in the biologics field. So if you look at biological medicines and the patents that are coming out of our Canadian groups, we are quite in the top of that realm of new and innovative discoveries for biological medicines. And if you look at biological medicines and you look at what regulatory authorities like FDA or Health Canada have been approving as pharmaceutical drugs over the last 5 to 10 years, a large proportion of that is biological drugs. So clearly that's an opportunity for us that when we do have such a healthy pipeline to retain that industry in Canada by helping grow these innovative companies. And we are starting to see that happen in some hubs. Like Vancouver, for example, has a very strong, biologic-based companies. Toronto is another area where we're starting to see this develop into a hub where we have many early stage companies investing in biological drugs, whether it be for cancer, whether it be for rare diseases, and similarly Montreal. So we see those ecosystems starting to develop. And I think the opportunity is ripe to ensure that we don't lose this promise and we allow these companies to scale in Canada and retain their biomanufacturing in Canada.
Could you answer the same question as to Ontario's competitiveness within Canada and perhaps its own area of unique specialty, let's say?
Ontario does have actually a very strong industry in this area, especially early stage industry. And in my mind, there are two areas where we see very good presence in Ontario. One is in cell therapy. We see a lot of early stage companies, as well as research institutions that are coming up in the cell therapy field. So, for example, in terms of research institution, we have networks such as the BioCanRx, or we have the Center for Regenerative Medicine, CCRM. So those are, definitely in this space. We also have a number of manufacturing organizations, so contract manufacturing organizations that are in Ontario. For example, we have companies like Therapure or Resilience, which is investing in biomanufacturing. We've got other smaller companies starting to also put their footprint in Canada, whether it's in specific areas like fill and finishing a product, or just scaling up manufacturing. So we have a number of those types of industries like Novacol, Dalton Pharmaceuticals. We have the big vaccine manufacturers in Ontario, right? Sanofi, Canada has invested significantly in biomanufacturing. They actually put some new biomanufacturing facilities on their campus in York. So that industry in biomanufacturing is also there. And then in terms of innovative biological medicines, we're actually quite good in the area of what we term as antibody drug conjugates. So antibody is a type of biological medicine. It's extremely specific because it's a medicine that's targeted to a specific protein in your body that you want that to be, depending on the disease. If you needed to target a specific protein, you can create an antibody against the protein. So antibody therapies are quite promising in the field of cancer, not only for therapy, but also for diagnosis, because they go bind specific cells. And in that realm of antibody development, Canada has actually got quite a bit of not only early stage R&D, but also companies that are coming up in Ontario. So, for example, in McMaster, there's a number of companies working in that space of antibody radionucleotide drug products, and what these can be used to is for improving diagnosis in cancer. Instead of using the typical chemotherapeutic drugs or radioactive drugs, you could use very specific antibody drug conjugates for this type of applications. So we see a number of companies that are coming up in that space. We see a number of companies coming up in the space of cancer vaccines or cancer therapeutics. So I think there's both in terms of industry, both in terms of academic groups in Ontario, there's quite strong presence. And then from the federal government perspective, our at the NRC, a large portion of our human health therapeutics program is located in Ontario. We have also established an advanced manufacturing research center in Mississauga. So again, the federal government is also investing in Ontario in many parts of the ecosystem that is going to be important for bioengineering.
And finally, Lakshmi, if you had 30 seconds to issue some kind of a call to action to, either someone in power or, groups like the industry or academia, whoever you want, to position Canada as a leader in the bioengineering/manufacturing sectors.
What I would say to our government is that this is the time to invest in bioeconomy. This is the time to change Canada's dependency and change it to a knowledge-based economy from a resource-based economy. And in that sphere, I think bioengineering and synthetic biology and biomanufacturing are three areas that are going to be extremely lucrative for Canada to take a leading edge in, because we have those foundational pieces and research and R&D and ecosystem and environment already in place. And the only piece missing is scale up. So let's invest. So we do have those anchor companies, and we do have those next generation future world leaders that will change and provide solutions for the future. To the industry, I would say that make R&D part of your strategy. Often industry in Canada are looking at their market exit strategy. So they want their product, and they want the product to be then picked up by a large pharma, or then exit out of that cycle and then start a new innovation cycle. I would really encourage our industry leaders, especially the innovative SMEs, to invest in R&D and to stay in Canada. To sum it up, I would like to call for an action of collaboration between both the government, the industry, and academia, to think about it as three fundamental pieces of an ecosystem. that needs to come together, work in partnership, and to make Canada the leading edge in bioengineering.